Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this first presentation in our academic writing and publishing bootcamp series. This is presentation number 1. It's entitled Motivations, Why Publish at All? And let me remind you that you have signed up for this series of training presentations in order to become, we hope, more effective at writing and publishing your research. So that's our goal at Top Edit. That's our goal, to help you be effective and help you learn from our experience writing and publishing. This then is the first in a series of training presentations that we hope will help you by providing insights, tips, and tricks to understand the English writing and publishing process. Then let's get started by talking about what we will cover in this presentation today. We are going to talk about 2 aspects today to get started on our academic paper writing journey, thinking about what to do before you start to write, how you can effectively prepare yourself to write. Many academics, many researchers, they start writing without thinking about preparation, and so the writing process is quite inefficient, and for them it's quite difficult. Don't fall into that trap. We can help you if you prepare to write effectively. So we will talk now in this presentation about 2 things: motivations for writing, understanding why you want to publish your next academic paper, and then secondly, how to develop an effective hypothesis, how to start thinking about what the message is in your next academic article. And don't forget, this is information, this is ideas for writing before you sit down and start to write. Things to do to prepare effectively for your writing of academic articles. So let's consider our motivations as academics for wanting to write academic articles. I have a good friend in Argentina. He was teaching me about publishing academic papers when I was doing my PhD in the UK. Now, he's called Luis, and he's published lots and lots of academic articles in leading international journals, places like Nature and Science, for example. And I remember that I asked him once, years ago, why do you want to publish? Why is it that you want to publish your research? And he told me that he likes to write academic papers so that when he's dead in the future, there will be a record left behind for future generations to understand his academic research. So that's his motivation for writing articles. And you might think, as I did at the time, that's kind of a strange one, a strange motivation, but nevertheless, it's his reason for wanting to publish his research. I encourage you to think about what your reason for publishing your next academic paper is. People have different motivations depending on their career stage, by and large, and depending on their own personality. So are you thinking of getting your next paper published to get funded, to get a grant, to get promoted perhaps, to move to that next career stage within your university or another university? Do you need to publish to get your PhD or get your master's? Perhaps, like Luis, you want to leave a legacy for future generations, or just develop research and development. It's important to think about these issues in the writing process, because your motivations for publishing your research are quite different to the motivations that editors and peer reviewers have when they see your article for the first time. Your motivations, your reasons for publishing your work are different to those of editors. Editors, are interested in readership, in getting people interested in reading their journal. Your reasons for publishing your work will be quite different. So let's think about that as a starting point to our journey as we start to learn about how to effectively write and publish our research. So what's your motivation? Why is it that you want to write your next academic article? We also encourage people to think about publishing their work, of course, because if you do research, you should publish that research. As academics, there's definitely a line of reasoning, a way of thinking that if your research does not generate publications, if your research does not generate articles, it may as well not exist, right? Interesting and unpublished are the same as not having been done. We are interested in doing research, and then we are interested in publishing that research so that we can increase our impact, we can have other researchers reading our work, other people can engage with our work. If you don't publish, then what's the point of doing the research in the first place? People would often argue. Now, as we've already discussed, as we've already talked about, your motivations for writing your research are going to be quite different from those of editors and reviewers. And we will talk in this course quite a lot about developing messaging, understanding your message in academic writing, understanding what it is that you are giving in your research articles to academic journals. Why is it interesting for the editor? Don't forget, academic editors are like little babies. They see lots and lots of shiny objects, lots and lots of academic articles. They have to decide which of those articles that they get to see are the ones that they're going to send out for peer review. You want your paper to be sent out for peer review. In Nature, in Science, we used to have parties in our research group when we got that email back from Nature saying, we have decided to send your article out for peer review, because it's a really, really big deal to get that email back. Don't forget that 9 out of 10 papers that get submitted to leading international journals get rejected by editors before peer review, the so-called desk edit rejection or academic rejection triage. It's just like you get hit by a bus, you get taken to the hospital, the doctor will decide what to do with you in terms of the next stage of hospital care. It's the same with academic articles. They get submitted to journals and editors decide what's going to happen next. You need to make sure that your paper is in that top 10% that get sent out for peer review, that are considered interesting enough by the editor to be considered for peer review. We are going to teach you, we are going to train you in this series, in this academic bootcamp series, how to ensure that your articles have the highest possible chance of being successfully sent out for peer review in leading international journals, and then the maximum possible chance of successfully passing through peer review. I promise you that at the end of this training course, you will feel more confident about academic publishing, and when you do academic writing and publishing, you will be more successful. You will experience more success as an academic researcher. So let's think about what editors and peer reviewers want to see in academic papers when we send them to journals. Editors want to understand your simple take-home message. What's the message of your academic work? Why is it interesting for them and for their journal? If they can't work it out, if they can't understand your simple take-home message, they will reject your paper. They will also reject without peer review if you don't convince them that your study is important. So these are things to think about as you think about starting to write. What is your message? One of the most important things to think about, and indeed one of the three key things to know before you sit down at your computer and start to try to write. What is your message? If an editor cannot work out your message, they will reject your paper. They will be thinking, I'm interested in this work, my readers will be interested too. Or, this study is not interesting enough for the readers of this journal, so I'm not going to bother, I'm not going to consider it for peer review. So that message is critical, and it's the key to getting your work published in those high impact factor leading international journals. So before you start to write, prepare yourself to write. That's what this presentation is all about. How can you prepare to write before you start to write? Checking the original nature of your results, the story, the take-home message. Ask yourself, is this new and interesting? Why? How does my project, my research project, my experiment, the data I've just collected relate to a hot topic? What's new and challenging? Do you provide a solution to a difficult problem? It's all in the story, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the key. Before you start to write your next paper, put down in 1 or 2 sentences what the message is, what's the story, what's the key thing that you would like your readers to understand from their experience reading your next article. What's the key message? I always think if you forget everything else, what would the one thing be that you'd like people to remember from this paper or from this presentation? This is key. Preparation is key. So, things to do before you start to write. Choose your topic, identify your audience, gather those supporting details, and identify your purpose. Because of course, different research projects can be targeted, can be sold to different academic journals. Not everything that we write is going to go into Nature. So prepare yourself and think about who your audience is going to be. The 3 things to know before you start to write, as we'll talk about, are your message, your audience, and the structure of your academic paper. Your message, your audience, and your structure. So in terms of your hypothesis then, and many people think that when putting together research articles, their idea is too hard to express. How am I going to do this? How am I going to get my idea across in simple, easy to understand ways? How am I going to do this? How am I going to express my research in a way that anybody can understand? There's always a way to do this. No research is too complicated that you cannot find a way to talk about it in simple, easy to understand, accessible ways. And we'll talk about doing this in our group discussions, how you can present your work in simple terms, because of course you are going to be taking an intricate statement that provides a clear introduction perhaps to an experiment, and you're going to articulate your intentions and possible outcomes in your writing. So ensuring that your hypothesis clearly defines both the topic and the focus of your experiment. So talking about your research question is critical because you have to be clear, you have to be testable within a reasonable timescale, you've got to be based on clear data collection, and your work has to be important, at least important enough, as we've talked about, to advance your field and be interesting to multidisciplinary audiences. So I will teach you, we will show you in later presentations how you can ensure that your hypothesis clearly defines both the topic and the focus for your work, expressed in simple, easy to understand ways. Okay, so thank you for listening to this presentation. We have talked about the academic paper writing journey by focusing initially on what to do before you write, talking about, in this presentation, your motivations and understanding why it is that you want to get your work published. Very important to think about before you start to write, and how your motivations are different to those of editors and peer reviewers. Secondly, your hypothesis. We've begun to develop ideas for messaging academic articles in the context of coming up with clear, easy to understand take-home messages that everybody, but especially editors and peer reviewers, will find interesting. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you in our next Top Edit Bootcamp Academic Writing and Publishing Training presentation.